following program contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing.
Kathy and I, we were going to go see a movie that night.
She had left work early to change clothes, put on makeup.
It was their anniversary.
We had planned to grill together.
When you get an early morning call, it's not good news.
This wasn't an attack to slow her down. This was an attack to kill.
There's blood everywhere.
It was a total shock. Why her?
Detective Bradley kept telling me we will get justice for Kathy. We will.
See you tomorrow, man. Have a good one. Take it easy. Kathy, it's Jeff. Tell me where you are. Haven't called me. Really excited for tonight. I'm on the way now. I love you. Kathy! I told you 5 times!
Okay, where at? Silver Beach Road. Silver Beach Road? Yes. My wife's hurt. There's blood everywhere. Take some deep breaths. Are you having an asthma attack? No, my wife is on the floor here. She's bleeding all over the place. Is she breathing? No, she's not breathing? No, it's hurting. They're on their way. They should be there shortly, okay?
Married since they were 19. Tonight should have been a dream date for Jeff and Kathy Lamb's 11th anniversary.
Kathy's just inside, and there's blood everywhere. I don't even know what was going through my head at the time. I think that was me going into shock.
When emergency personnel arrive, Jeff is outside, distraught. Inside, Kathy's 2 dogs stand guard over their beloved owner. The cops can't get near her.
The investigators had Jeff move the dogs. He put Nipper and Dakota in the backyard.
With the dogs safely out of the way, paramedics move in to examine Kathy, only to confirm what everyone on scene is thinking.
It wasn't until after they got there that I knew that she was already dead.
High school sweethearts, Kathy and Jeff first fall for each other at the tender age of 17.
The kids all hung out at our house. Kathy was kind of sitting on the middle cushion, and Jeff was sitting over on the other cushion, and he started scooting over closer to her. And she just kind of moves away, and he moved over, and she moved away, and he moved over.
Kathy ultimately gives in to Jeff's charms, and for the next 2 years, they're inseparable.
When she was 19, she says, well, I hope you won't be very upset, but Jeff and I went to the courthouse and got married. And so I gave them both a hug, and I said, no, I'm not upset. You could tell she loved him, the way she treated him, the way she looked at him. He was her first love.
We didn't really have any plans. We had planned to grow old together.
Like many young couples, they've had their share of trouble over the years, even a separation or two. But lately, everything's coming together for Kathy, Jeff, and their house full of dogs.
Jeff cared for her so much. They didn't have a lot of savings, but they did simple things that they enjoyed together.
She had always had animals. In fact, she said she didn't care if she ever had kids. Her dogs were her furry kids.
It's hard to believe, but is it possible these same dogs turned on Kathy?
The dogs were covered in blood. Is that Kathy's blood on the dogs? Is it their own blood?
The task of figuring out what happened on Silver Beach Road falls to Detective Kim Bradley of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office.
We entered the house. And just inside the living room, Kathy Lamb's body lay on the floor. There was a lot of blood. There was spatter from the floor to the ceiling.
She was hit over the head a couple times. Her skull had basically crushed in.
There's no sign of a murder weapon. Looking around, there are signs this could have been a robbery that got out of hand. But a closer look suggests otherwise.
There were 2 doors into the residence, and neither showed signs of forced entry. Kathy's wallet and her checkbook were still right there in the living room. We saw a lot of open drawers, but things were still in the drawers, as though whoever is doing it is staging it.
A third bloody dog is found pacing anxiously, locked away in a bedroom.
Bandit was a large wolf hybrid. Somehow Bandit ended up in a room that Jeff had decorated in wolf-type decor.
If only dogs could talk. Because they're the only ones who witnessed what happened here.
This wasn't an attack to slow her down. This was an attack to kill somebody. This was definitely personal.
The most personal suspect is the one showing the most grief, her husband.
He was almost hysterical. He simply collapsed in our arms.
And they get him away and they talk to him a little bit.
Jeff tells Detective Bradley he and Kathy have never been happier.
And where were you?
He says after leaving the towing company where he works, he went to help some friends move, and then came home to find Kathy lying lifeless on the living room floor.
Jeff didn't stand out. They were reconciling their relationship, and just recently he had come back and brought his dog Bandit to her house and was staying overnight.
We were doing little things around the house. We had planned to go on with our lives.
I'll probably have some more questions, but we'll wait.
And then things at the crime scene take a very strange turn.
Joey. Oh my God.
Police officers were yelling at me, trying to ask me who I was.
It's a really good question.
Somebody told me Jeff's fiance is here. And my reaction, his what?
Palm Beach County. Just up the coast from Miami, it's home to many of Florida's rich and famous.
When people think of Palm Beach County, they think of the coconut trees and the beaches and the big mansions. But we have many areas that don't fall into this category. Riviera Beach is one of them.
That's where Jeff and Kathy Lamb live, and where Jeff has just found his wife murdered. dead, in a pool of blood on their living room floor.
The area that she lived in, if you went up like a few blocks, you had the drug dealers and the crime and everything.
There were a lot of break-ins around their place. Jeff told me that he and Kathy were actually looking to move out of that area.
They had lived there for 10 years.
The area's not great, but she has big dogs. When you drive up to her driveway, you can hear them like clawing at the door and like barking like crazy. So no sane person would try to rob that house.
Maybe not, but on this day, even the dogs can't stop a cold-blooded murderer. While police consider every angle, robbery gone wrong, random killing, someone close to her, a fascinating scene unfolds right in front of their eyes.
The detectives have Jeff telling them, I'm in love with my wife and we're gonna go out and celebrate tonight. And then his fiancée shows up at the scene. It was kind of like a surprise to the detectives.
No kidding. Considering he's currently in the arms of his fiancée, while Kathy lies dead nearby, it's not a stretch to think Jeff may be exaggerating just how perfect his marriage is.
So I need you to explain this relationship to me.
I explained the whole situation to her.
How long have you been engaged to him for? A year and a bit.
Joey told me that she had always felt kind of guilty about being the other woman.
Kathy doesn't deserve that. She was a good person.
When I first met him, he was very interesting, very confident. Then I found out Jeff was married, and he goes, well, the relationship's ending, I'm sleeping on the couch, we aren't together.
And for a few years at least, that's true. Jeff is with Joey, not Kathy.
Joey was used to someone paying her way. Jeff ended up supporting her. He was the giver, and she was the taker.
Then, this love triangle gets even more convoluted.
Jeff and I had just signed a lease on a house.
I hadn't planned on living there. It was just she was going to be living there and I'd be with Kathy.
Jeff said he was staying with a friend. Instead, he was at Kathy's house. He was my fiance, and she was trying to take him back.
Joey knew if I wasn't with her, I was with Kathy. You know, I was with Kathy an awful lot.
I thought it was over, but it wasn't over.
Maybe Jeff's moving back in with Kathy is the push that sends Joey over the edge.
Clearly, once they find out that night that Jeff has a fiancée, yeah, she's going to become a viable suspect.
Joey has a ready alibi. She says she worked all day at a local restaurant, and then Jeff's mother called to tell her the tragic news about Kathy.
And she was crying hysterically, and I was really confused why she was crying and why she was calling me at work. She never called me at work. All I can remember her saying is that Jeff is really upset, and I heard the words, Kathy's dead. I could hear Jeff in the background crying. I could hear Jeff's mom crying. So I tell my boss that I've got to go, and then the next thing I know, I'm in my car driving to be with Jeff and his mom and try to find out what's going on.
So Joey says, and it might be true. Police have to verify her story and Jeff's too. They send his clothing to the lab and continue to pore over the crime scene. This also means taking a closer look at the wounds on Bandit, Nipper, and Dakota.
We didn't know which dogs had what injuries, so the dogs were taken to animal care and control. We wanted to have their mouths swabbed and their nails scraped, because I don't think that anybody could have done that to her without having these dogs attack them.
Jeff's family knows what happened to Kathy, but her own loved ones are left in the dark until the early hours of the morning.
At 5:30 in the morning, the phone rings. It was my next to the youngest sister.
They're showing a picture of Kathy on the news.
Sheila? She says, I think something's happened to Kathy.
Whoa, what? Slow down.
She had the TV on, and she saw Kathy's picture. and she turned the TV up.
The body was found by her husband.
And she started screaming.
It's a gut-wrenching moment for Kathy's adoptive mother, Benita.
I had to explain to my husband, what was going on. And that was very hard.
Here you go, sweetie.
Benita's husband is Kathy's biological father. Together, they've done everything these last 16 years to help Kathy heal from a deeply troubled childhood.
Benita had been in a similar situation growing up with a critical mother, being overweight, having the mother criticize that.
Kathy and her mother had had an argument, and her mother told her, well, go live with your father in Florida. And she was 14 at the time.
Moving in with her father and Benita, it's not long before a new family is forged.
The first time I met her, it was like I had known her all my life. I mean, we just chattered and cut it up and kidded, and we had such a great time. Just a great time.
Kathy lets Benita in on a dark secret. She was raped when she was a little girl. Benita finds her a therapist and helps her get through the experience.
We got her the braces, we got her contacts, she had lost some weight. When she finished with this therapy, it was like this very self-confident young lady.
Kathy starts dreaming about her future.
She had always wanted to be a pharmacist. She didn't have the money for pharmacy school, so she started out as a pharmacy tech.
She was very good at her job. She was a huge asset to the pharmacy.
Later, in a troubled relationship with Jeff, she hangs in there, hoping to make that work as well. Who knows? Maybe it would have.
She's feeling like, this man loves me. I'm short, I'm overweight, and it's not the love of a mother or a father, but it's the love of a man.
I think Jeff was an opportunity. An opportunity for her to have that happily ever after that every person who has self-esteem issues think that they'll never have the happily ever after on their own, that they need a partner or someone telling them that they love them.
She's a tough girl. You know, her life was starting to really pick up. You know, she was being promoted at work. It just broke my heart to know she came from that kind of a background and to have that kind of an ending to her life.
She was such a dynamic person, but because she had so much to overcome, and she overcame it, she was a large woman. But she was one of the most giving people and the most kind-hearted people. She loved people. You have to understand, Kathy was not a child of my body, but she was the child of my heart, because she had gone through so much. I'm her mom.
Kathy's autopsy shows no sign of sexual assault, but her beating is extreme. She's hit repeatedly with a very heavy object.
She was hit across the face 2 different times. One is close to the left ear and one's on her left cheek. And the object that she's hit with left a hexagon mark on her face. And I mean a clear hexagon mark. When people saw it, they immediately thought, this is some kind of a tire tool.
It's a good clue. But finding someone who has it in for Kathy isn't easy.
We didn't find anybody who didn't like Kathy. She lived a pretty simple life. Work, home, and her dogs. In the hope that someday her husband would love her.
That would be Jeff, the husband who works at a tow yard and likely knows all about tire tools. Tests on his clothing show a blood smear on the cuff of his pants. Jeff can account for that.
The pants was from kneeling down next to Kathy. They asked me on the 911 if she was breathing or not. Tried to check to see if she was breathing.
There's nothing that indicates he had anything to do with this crime. There's no injuries to him. There's no blood spatter on him.
But what was he up to when Kathy was beaten to death?
Mr. Lamb, it's Detective Bradley. What time were you at work until?
He actually took 2 days to write out an itinerary of where he'd been on the day Kathy was killed.
Kathy leaves work at 4:30. Sometime between 4:50 and 4:55 is when she's killed.
At 5, is that the tow yard?
People at the tow yard said that they saw him there about 5:05 in the afternoon. If he's at the tow yard at 5:05, it's just impossible. He could not have killed her.
That doesn't mean it wasn't someone close to him.
Some of the girlfriends he had were kind of abusive to Kathy. Joey was verbally abusive. I was concerned. I said, Kathy, you gotta watch your back, like, be careful. Kathy said she's not gonna come near my house.
Weeks before the murder, someone did get near enough to leave a not-so-subtle message.
Somebody carved B-I-T-C-H onto her car right when Jeff was talking to Kathy again.
At the time, Kathy had her suspicions.
We weren't sure who it was, but she had thought it was probably Joey.
We just happened to love the same man. It was all gonna get figured out.
I know that she was jealous of Kathy.
I was angry at times with Kathy. I didn't understand it. Why was he going back to her?
In Palm Beach County, Florida, police are sorting through the threads of a very tangled romance and wondering if Kathy Lamb's killer is her husband's jealous lover, Joey Lee Franco. After all, an insult was scratched into Kathy's car just weeks before the murder.
Looked like someone had keyed it in. I immediately thought of Joey or another ex-girlfriend.
That was not me. I remember Kathy thinking it was me, Jeff asking if it was me. That was definitely not me.
Maybe not, but they did have a rocky relationship.
There were times she and Kathy exchanged some angry words with one another.
Joey clearly resents being Kathy's romantic rival, but is she a killer?
Joey agreed to take a voice stress test, and Joey passed without any indication of deceit.
She had a rock-solid alibi. She was working a reputable, nice restaurant. They talked to witnesses that said she was actually here.
It looks like Joey had absolutely nothing to do with Kathy's murder. But someone killed this woman, and her family is in turmoil.
Kathy was such a giving person. She changed my life. She changed my husband's life. She changed her sister's life. For her graduation, we got her plane fare to go up and visit her birth mother. She came back and she handed me this box.
How was your trip?
And I opened it up. There's one of these little wall hangings. And it said, "Chance made you my mother. Love made you my friend." So I wasn't only her mother, I was her friend, and she was mine.
Someone out there doesn't feel the same way about Kathy. But who? When Jeff returns to the house, he finds what might be an important clue.
Detective Bradley, please.
Her mother specifically requested a ring, and that got me looking through her jewelry. And I found her engagement ring, but I didn't find the earrings I'd also bought her.
He tells the detectives that items were gone through, earrings were missing, and some cash.
About $300. With so many desperate drug users in surrounding neighborhoods, that's a pretty good motive for murder.
We talked to different people in the neighborhood. Down the street, somebody else's house had been burglarized.
Not only that, a witness has ID'd a likely suspect, Larry Carnegie, a convicted burglar suspected of working in Kathy's neighborhood.
Mr. Carnegie, you know why we brought you in here today?
I robbed 3 houses down from that house. I heard about that. I had nothing to do with it.
Carnegie told me that no self-respecting black man such as himself would go anywhere near a house filled with dogs.
Those dogs. Detective Bradley knows there's no escaping their presence in this case.
You really couldn't go to Kathy's house and not realize that there are 3 dogs just inside those doors. We really felt that we would have somebody with dog bites or at least dog scratches.
Carnegie has neither, and nothing else connects him to Kathy's murder.
Get him out of here.
Police use the media to spread the word. They're looking for a killer with telltale dog bites or scratches. The tips start rolling in.
Somebody stated that they heard a man talking about fighting with dogs and that he'd been dog bit. Looking into that,
You have some dog bites.
revealed that this person
You got these how long ago?
had fought with his landlord's dogs.
Take him out of here.
It's one frustrating dead end after another. And then, 9 days after Kathy's murder, Jeff calls in again. He's made a grim discovery in the house.
Hi, it's Jeffrey Lamb.
I found a tooth that evidently CSI had missed.
A tooth?
I helped him clean up some, because there was blood all over the floor. And I saw how upset he got.
Hey, what's
that?
Is this a tooth?
Whose tooth, and how did it get there? Police check the medical examiner's report. Kathy's teeth were not damaged in the attack. It's not hers. Could the killer have somehow lost a tooth during the violent struggle in the living room?
The medical staff in our jail notified me a couple of men had been booked into the jail and treated for dog bites.
And guess what?
Mr. Davis.
One of those inmates, R.J. Davis, not only has dog bites, but also a missing tooth. Case closed if the tooth matches. It doesn't.
It's hard when you get information that seems so promising, and you follow that and it turns out to be nothing.
More questions confound Bradley when the mouth swabs and nail scrapings from all 3 dogs come back. There's not a trace of DNA that could have come from the killer. Aside from some of Kathy's blood on Bandit's paws, the blood on their fur is all their own. This means the killer must have subdued them during the attack. But how? And there's something else.
We were surprised to find out that Bandit had no injuries of blunt force trauma. He only had a dog bite.
The attacker clearly beat the 2 smaller dogs, but the biggest, Bandit, is left unharmed. What gives? Mystified, Detective Bradley calls on Lieutenant Bob Anderson, a police officer and an expert in canine behavior.
They're trying to figure out what factor the dogs played in all of this and why this dog had puncture marks.
He starts with Bandit's blood trail.
Bloody paw prints. There was some blood where he jumped up on the bed. He had blood on himself. They analyzed the blood and they found out it was hers, which shows that obviously he was out during the altercation.
The dogs got into it.
They were separated.
Sometimes males just don't get along, you know? It's a jealousy thing, it's a dominant issue. And pit bulls, because of their genetics, they've been bred to fight. Her 2 dogs were not going to accept him, and it was never going to happen.
At least one of Nipper and Dakota bit Bandit in the neck.
The killer must have beaten Dakota and Nipper during the mayhem, but there's still no clue why Bandit is locked in the bedroom. Unless it's related to Anderson's final and most chilling conclusion. The murderer is not a stranger.
If a stranger comes in, they're going to protect their domain.
If someone had hit Kathy, they would have been bit. Nipper was actually trained for that.
The dogs would have bit this individual, there would have been somebody else's blood on the scene.
It was a really strong indication that whoever had come into the house and done this to Kathy was somebody that the dogs knew.
Jeff Lamb and Joey Franco have alibis, and few other people could make it past the dogs into the house.
Whenever we went to pick her up at her house, you just hear these vicious barks and claws at the door, and so we never dared go inside of her house.
Clearly there's someone who could have entered and not been attacked. Police are stumped. Who could it be?
They followed every lead. That didn't take us anywhere because it's still unsolved.
It's almost a month since Kathy Lamb is bludgeoned to death in her Palm Beach County home, and her murderer still roams free. For police, frustration sets in as their most promising leads turn to dust.
They turned over every stone. They banged on every door up and down that neighborhood.
And then officers receive a peculiar 911 call that sends them racing to Joey Franco's house.
There was a suicide attempt on Jeff's part.
I tied a noose around a swing set, and I was planning on hanging myself out in the backyard.
I got the noose off his neck and got him to lay down.
With Kathy gone, felt life wasn't worth living anymore. I was taking someone else's prescription drugs, and I had a meltdown.
Next thing you know, Jeff's suicidal thoughts turn into a homicidal rage.
I was getting ready to take a shower. And he proceeded to choke me until I passed out. I was just trying to fight for my life. And he tried to handcuff me in our bathroom. Finally, the cops came pounding on the door. They arrested him.
When Jeff finally gets himself under control, he tells the responding officer a very strange story.
Jeff tells him that his wife was murdered and he's waiting to be cleared so that he can collect her insurance money. And that officer calls the detective.
An insurance policy. Now this is an interesting twist. Bradley learns Kathy Lamb does have a policy through her work for more than $27,000. And the beneficiary is Jeff.
Jeff had been in a security business and was arrested for stealing from that business. Part of his probation was paying restitution. The amount of the restitution and the amount of Kathy's life insurance were very close.
It wouldn't be the first time a husband kills his wife for money. But as long as Jeff has an alibi, he can't be the murderer.
He brought receipts showing that he'd been to the post office, paying bills, getting gas. A lot of people saw him that day at different times, working at the tow yard, helping people move.
Bradley times the route from Jeff's work to Kathy's house.
The tow yard is very close to a road which would take him dead south right into Kathy's house. It's 19 minutes to drive each way.
There just isn't enough time for him to drive to Kathy's house, commit the murder, and be seen by co-workers leaving at 5:05.
It simply wasn't doable. Person cannot be in two places at one time.
On what should be Kathy's 31st birthday, neither her family nor the detective trying to bring her killer to justice have cause for celebration.
It was on a Saturday, and I got this phone call. Benita, this is Detective Bradley. I said, oh, Kim, how are you doing?
I wanted to call and see how you were doing today.
I knew it was Kathy's birthday, and I just wanted to find out how you're doing. And it blew me away. And she kept telling me, we will get justice for Kathy. We will.
Thanks. Oh.
Bradley's suspicions gnaw away at her. In her mind, it keeps coming back to Jeff Lamb. She checks out his cell phone records for the day of the murder, and bingo. She finds some numbers that may shatter Jeff's alibi for good.
The phone records showed phone tower hits, where phone calls originated from. He had himself in Jupiter the whole day.
We were able to put him away from the tow yard around 4:45, 4:50. The calls are heading south towards his house.
At the time of the murder, he was actually near or on Silver Beach Road.
It's the first real break in the case, and Detective Bradley uses it to poke holes in Jeff's version of what happened. When questioned again, his coworkers can't be sure if they saw him at the tow yard or maybe just his truck. They're also no longer sure when he left work that day.
Nobody really knew his whereabouts between 4:30 and like 5:20. We had like a 50-minute window of no one really knowing for sure where he was.
Bradley's persistence is slowly shredding Jeff's alibi. What she needs now is some kind of proof he was inside the house at the time of Kathy's murder. So she orders a more detailed examination of the jeans he wore that night.
At the Palm Beach County Crime Lab, we had a blood spatter expert, Stuart James, come in to examine the pants.
This had already been to the lab and everything, but in the front left pocket, I found an earring.
Funny thing, the earring matches the description of the earrings Jeff reported stolen. And it's only the beginning. There are some previously undiscovered dark spots deep in the fabric of his jeans.
I used a stereo microscope to examine the small spots, which turned out to be blood.
You cannot see by the naked eye at all. Until you get it with 50-time magnification, you see this blood that's embedded into the fibers of the pants.
These small droplets were driven into the weave, and therefore the person wearing that clothing was in proximity to a bloodshed event that produced impact spatter.
Will the discovery of the tiny spots of blood force a confession?
The dog's out to the back.
Not from Jeff Lamb, it doesn't. Instead, he counters with a simple explanation. When he took Dakota and Nipper outside, they shook and spattered blood onto his jeans.
It was from the dogs. That's the only way it could have been.
It's perfectly plausible, except for one thing.
The blood they tested on the jeans was Kathy Lamb's blood.
None of Kathy's blood is found on the dogs, so they couldn't have shaken it onto Jeff. Science obliterates his explanation. The police may have cornered a killer, but they're still missing a key piece of evidence. And then, a stroke of luck.
I received a call from one of Jeff's co-workers,
Detective Bradley.
convinced that he had found the murder weapon.
The roof is leaking, so they sent a couple employees up on the roof of the building to try to find the leak. And there's the tire iron.
Unfortunately, 2 months after the murder, it's been weathered clean by the rain and sun. No blood, fingerprints, or DNA. It may not matter.
When you put this against the photographs, it was definitely the tool used to kill her.
And that's when I said, okay, well, hey, I might need a lawyer.
It's been an intense 2.5-month investigation, but Detective Kim Bradley finally has enough evidence to charge Jeff Lamb with the murder of his wife of 11 years, Kathy.
When we found the tiny blood spatter on Jeff's pants, and it came back as Kathy's blood, that gave us probable cause to make the arrest on Jeff.
Jeff Lamb?
I told him that I was charging him with first-degree murder. I was really surprised when he looked at me blankly. No surprise, no remorse, nothing.
2 years later, at Jeff Lamb's trial, the prosecution lays out their theory of how and why Kathy is murdered. They believe Jeff plans to collect Kathy's life insurance before she divorces him for leasing a house with his fiancée, Joey.
He took that tire iron from the tow yard. He knew what he was going to do with it.
He drives the car he's working on at the tow yard. It's Joey's, so his co-workers will see his truck and think he's still there.
Kathy gets home probably around 4:45. She puts on her dress.
These dogs weren't going to attack Jeff. He's part of the family, he's part of the pack.
She walks into the living room. She is surprised by Jeff being there.
I'm sure that Kathy's heart broke before that first strike came to her head.
I can't imagine it was just for the insurance money because the beating was so personal and so violent.
When the fight took place, it became mayhem, and one of the other dogs must have lashed onto Jeff's dog's neck. He hit the dog to get him off, his dog. He brutally beat the dogs because he was trying to make it look like someone broke into the house.
He then takes his dog into the bedroom. He changes his shoes, his shirt. He takes the other items with him.
He went back to the tow yard. He threw the tire iron up on top of the roof.
And then he drives to his friend's house, and he acts perfectly normal.
As he drove to Kathy's house, he kept leaving messages on the phone, acting concerned and worried.
Kathy, it's Jeff. Are you okay? You haven't called me.
That's when Jeff made his major production, his 911 call.
My wife's hurt. There's blood everywhere.
Kathy's beloved dogs, Nipper and Dakota, don't recover from their injuries and are put down. They couldn't stop her murder, but they did help lead police to her killer, the only person besides Kathy who could have made it past them.
He was found guilty of first-degree murder, and in Florida, a first-degree murder charge carries a mandatory life in prison sentence.
I didn't want to believe it. And I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. But in the back of my mind, I thought he had to have had something to do with it.
Even after Jeff beat me, I kept going back and forth about whether or not he did it. Once we were at trial, and I started seeing the evidence, watching the trial, I finally realized Jeff did it. He actually killed Kathy and took her from her family and from her friends, and it was beyond, I couldn't understand it. Obviously, a lot of the things that Jeff had said, 90% of them were lies. I've spent the last 10 years of my life trying to figure out what was actually the truth, what was a lie. Did he tell me the truth about anything?
Jeff Lamb sticks to his story and refuses to confess.
I didn't kill my wife. I didn't hurt Kathy, and I did not kill her.
The prosecution, however, believes the evidence tells the real story.
This wasn't one of those cases where one piece of evidence showed he did it. We needed the tire iron to match up, the blood spatter on his pants. They needed the cell phone records to show that his alibi wasn't truthful.
This one person that Kathy loved, this one person that she'd always held out for, is the last person that she saw as he beat her to death.
To me, justice would have been him being in a pine box. It's somewhat of a justice. It made it to where, okay, I can live with this. Had he been found not guilty, I don't think he would have lived much longer. I mean, being from Florida and everything, I have a lot of redneck friends, and one of them told me, you know what? If he's gator baiting the glades, they'll never find a piece of him. So he maybe should be glad that he was found guilty. I got justice for Kathy, but I did not get closure. Because she's not here.
I shed tears for every girl like Kathy. Because I know how desperately you want to be loved.
We had a daughter that made us so proud that she was ours. Love your family, love your friends, let them know. Because guess what? Tomorrow's not guaranteed. That's all we can ask for out of life, is that we be good people, that we treat people kindly, and we do what we can to help people. And Kathy did all that.